Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Sultans and Sneakers. I'm your host, Mahin the podcaster, and back for I think the fourth time. I'm here with Shaykh Umair Haseeb in his beautiful home. So welcome back, man. It's been a while since you've been on the show.
Dude, I think it's before COVID.
We did the one IG stream about like sartorial.
Yeah.
That one kind of sucked, dude.
Yeah, that was.
I think it was an experiment for your IG at the time and stuff, but
That was the first time that was like the day that I got Instagram.
Oh, really?
Something like that.
Well, I think the thing of it is that as far as official, I wouldn't count that. I put it up on the channel, but it's not like an official podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into like the topic of tonight, which is Ramadan, since the last time we've actually done an official podcast, which I think was when I came back from Morocco, right? Remember that?
Yeah.
When you had the spot at in Hyde Park.
That was the week before COVID.
Right. Was it? Right.
I think so. Like that's like my that was my timestamp.
Oh yeah.
Because I remember.
Because I had just gotten back.
Right.
So that was 3 years ago. But since then, you're now working with Tatlif Collective.
Now I'm at Tatlif.
So why don't you give some folks an update on what you've been doing with Tatlif?
Well, alhamdulillah. So Tatlif is growing. The community is growing in Chicago. I work as the director of religious affairs over there.
Sure.
So really dealing with is actually like teaching, and then developing a vision with the other staff members, and you're familiar with them.
Yeah.
Ali Dia, who's the executive director.
Right.
Dr. Will Caldwell, who's the director of he's the director of education, and Mike Spice, who's the director of community engagement or outreach.
Right.
And then you have Salah Rahmani, who's the director of like director of operations over there that works out of the Bay. But as the community is growing both here, Chicago, and in the Bay, and there's a lot of needs of the community, we're sort of moving into this like really, I think, cool direction of providing a very sourced knowledge, but now changing a lot of, I wouldn't say actually changing, but really modifying a language given the cultural landscape of the United States of America right now, and like the things that our Muslims are facing. And one of the neat things about a lot of that is that it's taking us back to our roots, and bringing back like this level of one-on-one, like, and post-COVID too, because we're going from like, this is one of the cool things, is like going from virtual to in person.
Yeah.
Is that we're re-engaging really strongly in like personal development with people that are around us, and having really intimate dialogues with members in our community, and then going back to doing like one-to-ones, and going back to like, really it's nice because alhamdulillah everybody's like seasoned on the team, but going back to that like beginner's mindset, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like beginner, like how it used to be. It's really, so it's sort of like veterans playing rookie year again, which is, and it's fun when you're with the people that you love, you're with friends, and we're visiting scholars, visiting mashayikh, programs. I mean, I think there's a program, mashallah, every single day except for 1 or 2 out of the week.
Right.
There's a program, and you really make up for even those 2, given all of the retreats and the weekend seminars and all those things.
I think what makes Tatlif unique, and why like I've always felt like it was an obligation for myself to like support it in any way I could, was that you guys have obviously, and this can't be really replicated, because the kind of work that y'all have put in at an individual level, where you're doing mentorship and like you're dealing with people's issues. Well, I always joke that like Mike Slice is the oldest looking dude in his 30s in the world, right? Because of his white hair, right?
Yeah.
But amount as far as like when you're taking on people's burdens too, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the thing that like you're gonna have a lot of organizations, as are gonna come and try to do stuff like Tatlif, but like it takes a special type of person to be able to like really be with people individually and build those like deep relationships.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
with Ramadan coming up in like a week or so how are y'all approaching it with like new Muslims first Ramadan? Like is
the same as you don't break what you don't if it ain't broken, there's no need to fix it. So like Mike is like the best to speak on that.
Okay.
How we do, because he's so good at it, and he sort of mastered this craft of speaking and sort of guiding new Muslims in their first Ramadan or their second Ramadan or their first half Ramadan or whatever that is. And then like Will has a really good, I think he has a good pulse on how to make accessible the language of Ramadan to them, because it's a foreign language for a lot of people, just even the language that we use around this month. But at Ta'leef, it's great. This is going to be our second year doing Tarawih every single night.
Right.
And you've been there, and it's a vibe. It's it's a really neat Tarawih over there. And then 2 programs. So you have like there's going to be like a Tuesday night program with Sidi Ali Dia and Shaykh Abdul Evans, and I believe on Saturday it's with myself, and then an iftar. So both of those have an iftar. So it's
right.
Begin the qiyam. And but I think your question is more like, how do you deal with this with people that are
like brand new? Because do they have like? I'm sure some folks are excited, and some have anxiety.
Yeah, that's the thing that. So that's we'll come to that anxiety part of it.
Yeah,
but
that's something we still deal with today. Like I have anxiety about Ramadan next week.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? It's like how am I gonna function at work and and all that kind of stuff. But
so it doesn't go away.
Yeah,
right? But with people that we just did like a Ramadan workshop, right? Last Sunday, Mike and Will did it. Dr. Caldwell, Mike Swice and Dr. Caldwell. You engage with it. First of all, you meet people where they're at, but you begin with a very basic understanding of what Ramadan is without overwhelming them. And also, we all have like Ramadan's one of those things that even if you're a seasoned vet, when it comes to Ramadan, I think it always just sneaks up on you. In the modern world too. So you sort of, you're used to it, you're used to community, you're used to Tarawih, but there is no planning for Ramadan sometimes. There's no understanding of what gifts you're going to get from this month. And it's always going to be a little overwhelming. I really think that. And then for new Muslims, it's just, creating communities for them, ambassadorships for them, helping them, empowering them to not take this, like, not to overwhelm themselves with things. Take it step by step. And as we know, there's a fiqh that's for new Muslims, and there's a very specific fiqh for new Muslims who are engaging in worship like that. Especially like we have people that have taken their shahada. There was a brother I think who took a shahada yesterday. Yeah. Right. And so he'll be his first Ramadan. Like he comes in as Ramadan right away. Right. So how do you navigate that? Is it really even fair for him to engage totally and envelop Ramadan?
Well, a lot of cats are converting in Ramadan. You see, was Mike a Ramadan convert?
Not sure.
I don't remember.
I don't know.
But
I know he fasted 2 Ramadans before.
That's right.
Yeah, he did fast 2 Ramadans.
He was already.
He was,
I got to ask you. So I'm waiting for y'all to drop the link for the Qiyam registration. Okay, I'll tell you why. This is like last year y'all had Sister Jamila cater that joint, I think. And she made these turkey sausages, like the patties. I took home like a tray of like 25 at the end of the night. Because at the end of the day, people were like, oh, I don't want this. Yo, dude, I was good for like a month. So I'm going to put a request in if y'all, if you don't have the menu set, I got a request to like, have Sister Jamila
She's great.
Do the sahur and get them them patties. It was on point.
I remember that.
We
had sahur together.
Yeah, right. And I took home because you hang around to the back and there are people like, oh, is anyone? You have a whole tray.
Right.
And I'm like, and this time, like for real, and I hadn't had a chance, but I was like, I'll do it for Talisa Iftar. So we're again.
Yeah, inshallah. I don't know what the plan is. I have to be honest with you.
Who organizes the food? I gotta talk to him.
I can't say anything.
Okay.
I can't. It's not authority. I can't let these are we do things very.
I think I'll talk to Ali, Mike, and Will, and Stara. I'll talk to everybody just to make sure I got it covered. I was like, one of y'all are pulling the strings there. There's only 5 employees, so I'll talk to everybody.
Listen. You gotta. This is above my pay grade. The catering's above my pay grade.
You know what I mean? So, I would like to ask you, so you were in Morocco for 8 years. Can you describe Ramadan before Morocco, living here in Chicago, and Ramadan after?
This is a great question. Obviously, so there was doing in Morocco, and not just Morocco, but doing in the Western Sahara as well, the Saharan Desert. That's a different experience. Morocco in America, fasting in America.
Like prior to going, like you, maybe like right before you were primed to go. So you're kind of like getting in this mental state to go overseas, right? Like
not because I moved there a couple months before Ramadan in Fez.
Okay.
By that, like going overseas to study wasn't even a conversation the prior Ramadan.
I got you.
I didn't really even make that decision. I made that decision like a week before.
Okay.
I actually left, a week and a half, I think.
Right.
To be honest.
Okay.
Um.
So it was a standard Ramadan for the most part, you would say. The one before the Ramadan before, because it's almost like a year before you actually
Standard.
went to Fez. Yeah,
Yeah,
standard.
it's super standard. There was no. I mean, I was like at this point, I it was a month where like I was still very engaged in community things, but not meaning that Tarawih was very very important. It was like Ramadan in America was like interesting because it's a very like tiring month. This was I think this was when we had what 19-hour Ramadans, 17, 18,
Which year did you leave?
2010, 2011.
Yeah,
2011.
this would have been like August. Right, Ramadan would have been August because I remember I moved to Chicago in 2008 and Ramadan was in September. So we're going 10 days every year.
Okay.
It would have been around August.
So long,
really long, really like the dog days of summer.
Yes. Okay. I that was really tough for us because there was you're in school you were working and you had to go to like export after
Right.
Tarawih, right? Like all the Muslim guys would go over to the gym because for some reason it's the only time everybody wants to get in shape. It's like those 30 days.
Can you parking lot that thought? Because I want to talk about that specifically,
Okay.
but we'll come back to that later. We'll pin that.
Okay, and you, community Tarawih was really important. Even just being in the mosque was like really, it was I think great to just be in hot weather outside and
Right.
Praying outside and praying with family. It was a time where Ramadan meant something more identitarian to me. There was a lot more culture involved with Ramadan of like how we approach Ramadan. There was this attempt to make Ramadan even then celebratory, right? Like a celebration. And it was a very standard Muslim kids Ramadan in America, right? You had to have programs or like khatiras. Then there was like I remember one of the like Dark Knight Rises came out and there was like the big conversation like the day of or the day night like moon sighting. It was like,
okay.
Astaghfirullah, we watch it or not? Should we watch it or not?
Right.
There was like that was like the debate.
Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty.
And this is pre-Tatlif Chicago?
Was Tatlif Chicago? No, Tatlif Chicago is 2011 or 10 or 11 or something like that. Tatlif Chicago does happen there, and I think more or less, if I'm not mistaken, I don't want to have any historical inaccuracies here regarding Chicago Tatlif, but there was Convert Care Chicago.
Well, yeah.
Before, because remember Tatlif is right now like Convert Care is a part of what Tatlif does. It's not what all of Tatlif does.
Right.
It's a part of it's a major part.
Yeah.
An important part, but it's not all. Before there was Mike Swice running Convert Care Chicago, so he had these things called Iftar ambassadors.
Mm-hmm. Right, I remember those.
Do you remember that? And we used to go.
Yeah.
And even one of the cool, it was an interesting thing. So those things were even for converts. But how many born Muslims, heritage Muslims would attend those things? Remember?
Yeah.
I remember Professor Umar Muzaffar would speak in these panels, or like somebody's home would be there.
Right.
So you had things like that, but that wasn't like every night. That was like once a week. There was a Turkish. Do you remember that Turkish in the north side of Chicago? There was a Turkish cafe.
Oh, you're talking about iCafe.
No. I forget the name of it, but there's a family, really lovely family, Turkish family, and a white American sister, a Turkish husband and a white American wife, both of mashallah Muslims. They would open up their space. I forgot the name on the top of my head, but really big space. I mean, they used to do little programs over there.
Okay.
That was really fun. So I mean, it was an event. It was an event, serving and then worshiping together. Ramadan was eventful for sure.
Right.
It was definitely eventful.
Yeah. So and then talk about like, was first Ramadan in Fez like culture shock, or was it easier?
The first
because you're in a Muslim country.
Well, the first year was lonely because I come here and I don't have family.
Because you're like a month. Oh, so you're like only a month in, right?
I'm a month or two in, something like that. Yeah, if that. No, 3 months in, but still like.
But you weren't in the Qayrawayin yet, right?
No, you were no.
Yeah.
No. I was. The first one was there. Second one was in the desert, Mauritanian desert. But I wasn't. No, it was the first one was really lonely because I didn't know anybody, and like everybody would invite you over to their house, but you're not like in yet because you're still a foreigner.
Yeah.
You sort of miss like whatever your mom made. Because I mean, you're a kid. I was 19 years old. Like I'm still like a little, a little hesitant, a little still scared. But it definitely, as things went, as like took only a month. Like by the end of Ramadan, I was good.
Yeah.
By the end of that Ramadan, I was like, by week 3, I was like I got this.
Because the thing is, you're missing the community part, right?
You're missing the community part, and the community parts, you have Tarawih and you have heritage Muslim families, but there's no such thing as like if you go overseas, there's no community program in a Muslim country.
Right.
There's no like community program. They're not gonna have a qiyam program, right? They're not gonna have sort of the there's not the pageantry of Ramadan that we attempt to provide here,
right?
With good conscience, and then Ramadan is quite literally a month of spiritual retreat there.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I learned that like Ramadan is a spiritual school, and it actually means to disengage, not to engage, right? And North Africa is Maliki. Obviously, you have Tarawih in the mosque, but it's mustahab in the Maliki school, meaning it's recommended in the Maliki school to pray Tarawih at home, right? That's a recommended opinion. So people do worship like at home a lot, and you're not going to see a lot of even I'll give you an example. Like you won't have public lectures that much unless you're a student and you have to those last 10 days of Ramadan. People wouldn't do public lectures because in fiqh it's makruh to do ilm wa ta'lim and i'tikaf, to teach and study in i'tikaf when you're in spiritual retreat, according to Al-Baji. Like it's that it's really weird for us because programming is at its peak, right? In Ramadan, online programming is at its peak, right? Like the YouTube videos go up, the Ramadan reflections things go up, the qiyams the masjids are there, and there's always a bayan and a khatira and this, that, which is I think maybe good for our space where we're in because we need it.
Yeah.
But generally, heritage, they're doing it by the book. And it's like, no, we disengage in all of that stuff this Ramadan.
Right.
There is nothing. There's Quran, there is remembrance of Allah, they read the Dalailul Khairats, they do more, finishings of that, and there's the night prayer, right?
Okay. So even like the Qayrawayin Masjid isn't like packed.
For Tarawih, it would be.
Tarawih, it would be.
Yeah, Tarawih definitely.
But as far as because people are still going as far as like because you talked about the whole praying at home in the Maliki school, but you still got enough people there that could.
You'll still. I mean, the reason being is people want to do a khatam of Quran and they still want to that communal experience in the mosque.
Right, but what is about stuff like the zawiyas having their their programming and stuff? Yeah,
their programming is nothing but dhikr.
Oh, but is it more regular other than Thursday nights?
It'll be like a Thursday night. Every now and they'll have a Laylatul Qadr thing.
Okay.
For sure. Like Laylatul Qadr, you'll see the Zawaya like lit.
Okay.
And they'll do an entire night of Adhkar there. And I mean until Salat al-Tahajjud. And they will eat.
Did you live with Sidi Ayashi rahimahullah during any Ramadan?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about his Ramadan?
Yeah. I've never seen anything like it in my life. His Ramadan, obviously, he was very, very old, and he still fasted. Maybe there was a last few that he didn't because of medications that they had to give him.
The last few years.
The last few years of his life, he was 126, 27.
Right.
Right.
And you by that time, you were back here, right? Did he pass away when you were in Fez?
I was still there, yeah. Finally, no. He passed away. He passed away in 2018 or something like that. He passed away in 2018. I had January that I stayed for an extended period. January I returned, or February. January, February I returned. March he passes away. Late February, March he passes away.
So, but when you first moved in with him, he was still fasting. So how did that fast look when for observation?
For him, it was. It was powerful because you're reminded of the hadith of the Messenger of Allah, and I think have you met him?
No.
When you went to Fez, was he alive?
No, because I went in 2020.
You went in 2020. Oh yeah. So he, rahmatullah alayhi, may Allah sanctify his secret. He said it was very similar to the Prophet ﷺ in one regard, in that the Messenger of Allah was known to tighten his belt in the month of Ramadan. So here's a man that I've seen do multiple khatams of Quran outside Ramadan in a single day once.
What?
Yeah. I've seen him do a khatam of Quran in a single day.
Outside of Ramadan?
Outside Ramadan. right?
Yeah.
Like Allah put. This is one of his karamats that Allah literally. My cousin, I won't mention him here, but my cousin was there. He saw it with his own eyes.
How I've heard of people doing it. Like how many hours if
He would start right before Salat al-Fajr and he would end by Isha.
and just go like break? Would he eat or just have a
He barely ate.
in general?
Barely ate. He would eat a few bites of food here and there. Fasting wasn't easy for him. He just didn't eat much. He ate some vegetables. He would eat some fruits, and that was it. You know, a little bit of a small plate of couscous his daughter would give him.
Yeah.
And like those pickled vegetables, and that's
Yeah.
it. Dates here and there. I mean, he was just there was a he was there was a I mean there was a story of him, and this is known even a lot of the ulama of the Qayrawayin know the story as well. That one time he came to a dhikr gathering early, right? I mean, it was supposed to start at like 9. He got there at 7. 2 hours, just sat in the corner by himself, and everybody came in, and you know they do the thing where the sheikhs are, and then there was a young lad that's thought in his head why did the sheikh come so early? Why did the sheikh come so early to the dhikr gathering? It's over, and he goes to sleep, and see the Ayashi came to him in a dream, and he said, like, young man, you know, you thought, like, why, you asked yourself why I came this early. I knew that if I came late to it, everybody would stand up and greet me, right? And I didn't want any arrogance to enter my heart, so I came early, right? So that's just who he was. Like, he entered your dreams, right? I mean, it was really, really phenomenal, man. Very and really humble. But in Ramadan specifically, he would do. I wouldn't say like do a khatam of the Quran, but his Quran reciting was so intense that if you were to see it, it was honestly as if I could say it was as if Jibril was revealing it. He was seeing Jibril reveal it. Like he was in awe of the Quran. There were points I've seen him just recite verses of the fire and just stop.
Yeah.
And just couldn't breathe. Right? There are times like it was as if he was reciting it. To be honest with you, like hearing him recite the Quran in Ramadan, it was you would think that he's reciting it to the Prophet ﷺ, waiting for his acceptance. Like that's literally his hal would be. So it wasn't just like more. It was very intense. It was very like present. There was haiba, like haiba is like a sense of awe.
Right.
And I would see goosebumps on his arms reciting the Quran in that month. Like he was so in tune with it. And then he would spend the rest of it doing the La ilaha khairat, more recitation. He would read, and he'd read the dua nasri a lot in Ramadan, the dua of the oppressed, right? Ya man ila rahmatil mufarru. He would read it a lot, like a lot in Ramadan. So his dhikr came in, education would take a back seat. So he wouldn't even engage in durus with us, like in class with us. He would just spend that time just doing dhikr and praying tahajjud. He couldn't stand up. By this point, he was on a wheelchair, so he would pray sitting down just all night. I was talking to Amoli Al-Hassan in Fez recently. September. This
is Sidi Usama's father-in-law?
Rahmatullah, his father-in-law, yeah. So I was speaking to him, and we were just reminiscing just for a minute about Sidi Aisha. He said when he left, he said like that was the end of an era. Like it marks the end of an era, his passing in Fez. But it was really like seeing his one of the crazy parts, he just wouldn't, like his iftar, he wouldn't eat much. Like he would have 3 dates and that was it. That was his iftar.
Not having dinner later?
Barely have dinner later, yeah. He would have a little bit of honey, maybe milk, right? Like his daughter would eat nothing much. Very, very, like, how are you doing this?
And he's not sleeping probably a lot.
He rarely sleep. I would see him intermittently take naps throughout the day, if that, And there were moments I thought he was sleeping, right? But he wasn't. He was actually awake and he was making dhikr. Like you can hear him make dhikr. And what was more beautiful is also just being in his home.
Yeah.
Because there was a good balance, which I learned about overly socializing with iftar parties.
Yeah.
Or they become like parties with iftar communal spaces of remembrance. So the iftar wasn't to come in and just to hang out and like kick it. Because I understand it and why people have the need for this because of a certain culture that we come from, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's the iftar itself is not a time for complete socializing to that point of getting nothing out of it but like a social experience, because it is a month of retreat. But the iftar part, the iftars themselves would be full of laughter and joy, but more importantly, it would be a time of like remembrance. There's a hadith, farhatan lisaim, that there's two joys for the one that fasts: breaking their fast, their iftar, and liqa'i rabbihim, like liqa'i rabbihi, like meeting Allah, meeting their Lord. So when you're in that space, it was almost. I mean, it gets you get emotional like remembering those times, man. It was like it was really cool. It was so dope because it was like people getting together, remembering God, but almost like preparing for the iftar was like us together preparing to visit Allah,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like this is how we're all gonna visit God. Like that was how it was presented. Um, and these are like yeah that I mean, why wouldn't anything what I just told you right now, like why wouldn't it change how I look at Ramadan?
Yeah.
Like it's amazing. And
But
it's
like
pretty-
now, is it like it almost feels like what you experienced now is just a letdown?
what do you mean, like coming back?
Yeah.
That's
After going through that,
uh-huh.
you know what I mean? Like what years? So by your third year there, that's when you were living with him.
Second,
Second.
no. I was with him 1.5 years in.
Okay.
Like if the, no, I think even less than that. Maybe 8 months. Like I was already.
Okay.
I was
So
already
how many
living with him.
Ramadans were you with? Like I guess
I've done a solid 6 Ramadans with him.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Maybe 5.
Right.
If I maybe 5, but what 5 to 6 around there.
And I asked that question because like there are 2 Ramadans for myself that like I can remember as like these Ramadans like felt like, because most Ramadans at the end, I'll be honest, I'm just dragging. I'm just like, man, when is Eid getting here,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you're just looking forward to the whole meme about like Return of the Fork,
That's
the
funny.
Star Wars meme. You know what I'm talking about, the cartoon,
That's what I haven't seen it. But that's really funny.
like the meme like Return of the Fork, or you know. Oh no, the fork was a return of lunch.
That's funny.
So there's 2 years I remember that really stood out to me for Ramadan. 2015, because I did Hajj that year, and it was before Hajj. And I talked about anxiety before, right? So I in the past I've always like done this thing where like, man, I gotta take off. Like I'm gonna take off as much time as I can in Ramadan because going to work sucks, and I don't have my coffee, and but this year I was like, I had 3 weeks vacation, and all of it was gonna go to Hajj. So I didn't have any like wiggle room there, right? So I think, but also the idea that I'm gonna do Hajj this year probably put me in a kind of like I gotta start getting ready for Hajj mentally. So I think that was part of it. And then I started. That's the year I got hit to Sheikh Faisal.
This is what year is this?
To 2015.
Got it.
So Sheikh Faisal's been around Chicago.
Oh
right?
yeah, that's pretty late.
Yeah, I had heard about him. I remember when he used to be at Villa Park.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, and I'd go there. I'd pray behind him. It'd be like, yeah, he was nice, but it wasn't like amazing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It didn't blow me away, right? That year he was leading at the Ackerman Sports Complex.
Got it.
You know what I'm talking about?
I know where
They
that
put,
is.
they had that one year. There was something about the acoustics in that joint that like enhanced his recitation or something. And so I remember those days I was in it. Like I was driving every night from like Bridgeview or Hickory Hills, that's like a 40-minute hike, 35, 40 minutes. And that year was like, man, I'm almost like, for me, Taraweeh doesn't count unless it's behind Sheikh Faisal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that was the one year, that year specifically, because I think I was going every night. I didn't stay for the whole, because I had to go to work the next day.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I just managed as far as like I'd go to work the next day and did my thing, come home, take my nap. It wasn't like, and I think, people need to understand, like, I think we have a habit sometimes, like we live such comfortable lives that you kind of have to embrace a little bit of discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
I think Ramadan it's not as comfortable.
Yeah.
It's not like you're not suffering, but it's not comfortable.
Right.
That's the thing.
Right.
And I think there was a little bit of discomfort throughout, but it was like manageable. And
Right.
so, and then at the end, I was good. So that was one. And the other, in most other years, I would take like the last week off.
Mm.
But what would I be doing? I remember this one year. This is 2014. My wife, I took off, I think close to 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks of work. So literally the year before. So 2015 was amazing. 2014, my wife went, I think she went to go see her parents.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she came back for Eid and stuff, or she was out for, and I remember, dude, I was going to the like now that's when I was doing the community stuff like hard. I was living in the city still. Wife was gone. I remember some Sunday mornings like getting home at like 8 in the morning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Like
it was like, what was I doing? Like I wasn't like I was going to Taraweeh, but then like you're just out kicking a or like that's what it was. It was like, oh, we gotta go. Like somebody wants pawn, we gotta go to Devon, get some chai, like post Taraweeh, right? What Kahwa House I guess was like last year, which I didn't really because Kahwa House, whatever people do, right? So that was but that's a lot of Ramadans. If I took time off, I wouldn't really utilize it. I'd go to Taraweeh, I'd be like, yeah, you get lazy because this whole thing of parking. You heard of Parkinson's law? You know what that is? Work expands the field of time allotted to it. So the more free time you have, you end up sometimes if you don't have like a really good plan, you'll just end up wasting it. So that's kind of how those Ramadans were. The other memorable the Ramadan that I felt like I also like benefited the most was I think this would have been I think it was either 2017 or 2018 because I did a full 10-day itikaf for the first time ever, for that only time in my life ever. And I left my cell phone in my car.
That's pretty amazing.
So I had a regular, so it was a digital detox plus being in the masjid. And the only thing I had was my beads, Quran, and I was reading Sea Without Shore by Shaykh Umair. Yeah. And that was it. I read both. I got through an entire reading of that. So I remember that put me in a zone. And I think I compare all my Ramadans to those.
Right.
And it's almost like in advance, I'm like, well, man, I can't take off 10 days this year. So it's going to be like, I'm already feeling like it's not going to live up to these past Ramadans. So how do you overcome that? Like you like it's fair to say that you're not going to like find a Ramadan like Sidious. I mean, like coming back it's going to be a letdown, right? So how do you deal with that?
So yeah, I mean, how are you gonna do it with Sayyidina Sheikh Ayashi's experience? I mean, and look, I got fortunate. If I spent it with somebody else in Casablanca or something like that, like it would probably be, another conversation. The Muslim world has its own issues when it comes to Ramadan, right? Like, the Musalsal is on NBC and you're just watching, religious serials. You know what I'm talking about?
That's when Omar comes out. I think the Omar series came out. The Omar series came out in Ramadan, yeah.
Yeah, that's and then the coffee shops are open. You go to Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Amman or Pakistan. Like I don't know. There's probably good. It just depends on where you are. I was just fortunate to be exposed by one, and I'm not trying to degrade somebody else's Ramadan experience, but this was just something I was just fortunate to experience it with him, and even experienced it in like the desert once, which was wild. With some of the Murabta Ahmed Fad and others like that. Allah have mercy on them or things like that. But when you come back to America, yeah, it's different for sure. It's different. The glad tidings is you're back you're united with your family and your loved ones, and there is the level of like people getting upset when you said no to the iftar parties.
Okay.
Because you're like, there's a lot, and you're like, oh, I'll go to a couple, but I don't know if I could do this like this much.
Are you already booked for the month?
Me?
Yeah.
No. I mean, you have for like if you're working in the Muslim community, as a scholar or a teacher, or a community leader, you're gonna have a tough Ramadan,
right? Because
that is prime time for you in terms of, that's even donation time, right? The fifth, it's really important to keep these organizations running. But like it's like, and forget that, even if you're just doing parking lot duty in the masjid.
Yeah.
Right? These uncles, Allah bless them, it's like they're just doing parking lot duty in the masjid. It's like there's a lot that goes into the aunties that are preparing iftars and the biryanis and the, and the whatever they're preparing.
Yeah.
I think at first I wasn't disappointed, bro. I like just sort of missed Fez, and I missed North Africa a lot. Like I just missed it. Like it was nostalgia. Yeah. Like I remember the smell of like the bisara in the morning, and right. Like I remembered some whatever. But then I think as I matured, I tended to like appreciate the fact that, look, can I tell you a story real quick?
Sure.
I was in I think this happened in the Shinqit, Mauritania, where I was with a sheikh. I went to visit a sheikh, and I asked them, could you make dua for them? It's like, this was this one teacher, can you make dua for the Muslims in America this Ramadan? And he said, في أمريكا كثر المسلمين.
Keep talking. I'm gonna adjust your camera just slightly.
He said, are there a lot of Muslims who are there a lot of Muslims in America? And I was like, define a lot. Like,
yeah.
I was like, by this point, like, I don't know about other states, but we're in Chicago.
Right.
If you go to a Walgreens, you're gonna see a hijab, somebody wearing hijab. If you go to, you're gonna see a Muslim everywhere, right?
Sure.
And I was like, yeah, there were a lot. They said, he goes, Yasumun? He's like, they fast? I'm like, yeah. He's like, Kulluhum Yasumun? He's like, they all fast. SubhanAllah, ask them to make dua for us. He said, they live in America. They live in a non-Muslim country or not in Muslim lands, and they still manage to fast, right? And I would tell them stories about, I was like, yeah, because remember, like, they've read in the books of fiqh or the seerah about people converting, but they've never seen it.
Yeah.
For them, it's an angelic experience. So when I tell them stories like people take shahada on a Monday and begin fasting on a Wednesday, bro, they started crying, bro. Like, they'd sit there, just be like, literally they would say, "Qulluhum la tansawna min salih du'aihim," like, tell them never to forget us in their prayers. The sheikh, like, these are like these great mashaykh and scholars. You start to appreciate, like, oh man, like, mashallah, like the fervor and the rigor that we're able to work these long hours,
right?
Still fast, manage the family stuff a little bit, and then fit in like khatams of Quran. And you tend to appreciate it. And isn't that what? If I didn't appreciate it, then my Ramadan would be a waste, because the last verse about Ramadan, all right, sort of in terms of the reasoning of Ramadan, Allah gives, not the last verse, but the reason. Surah Al-Baqarah, He says, لِتُكَبِّرُ اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ. You praise God to what He has guided you towards, right? لَعَلُّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. So you're people of gratitude, right? It would be a disservice if I was fortunate enough to be who I believe, to who I believe to be these really saintly, amazing people, come back and not learn from them the appreciation of things that should be appreciated. So yeah, of course you miss it, but you have to agitate yourself to appreciate the culture here a little bit.
When you talk about personal like development in Ramadan, and trying to like push yourselves, based upon what you saw from your Mashaykh, whether it's Sidi Ayashi or Mawlay Hashim or Sheikh Idris or whoever, have you ever like even thought about like, can I do one day like these guys? Do you ever thought of like, do you put yourself through like, because you hear these guys, you hear this guy like Nick Bear.
He's
a fitness company,
right.
And you see all these guys who are like really doing crazy things, like running ultra marathons. You know how like our friend Subi like
Subi Saadi,
Subi does like crazy the Ironmans and all. He's like pushing himself, right? And you literally witness people doing like things like khatams in one day, right? Is that something that you're like, can I like push myself to just do it once, or that kind of thing? Does that enter your mind? Because to me, I was listening to and this is how my brain thinks. That's why I'm asking this, because I was listening to a talk by Ustad New Saunders. Do you know Ustad New Saunders? I think we'd spoken about him.
Okay.
He lives in Medina, but he was educated in Tarim.
Mashallah.
And so he's talking about like all these adhkar. He's like, all you gotta do is like do Surah Yasin like in the morning, in the evening, and then if you do 1,000 Allahu Akbar, Allah, and then 1,000 salawat. I'm like, we're doing the math here. I'm like, there's all this time, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, like, do I haven't asked my voice messages. I'm like, see, no, this is like 2 hours of like stuff. I'm not saying I don't have it. I'm saying that like it just means like I gotta be dialed in and not waste anything else. But like, and maybe I could do one day like that. But do you ever think about, hey, if I just can push myself to like one day, and how do you? Because those thoughts enter my mind. Like, oh, maybe if I can do one day, maybe I can do another day.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And then like you build a pattern, and it's almost like you're building this puzzle. It's like working out. You're pushing yourself or what you call developing the spiritual muscle. That's what I mean. A lot of people think Ramadan is like that. It's like you're building the spiritual muscle. That you hear this idea that let's leave it. You're not gonna be in Shawwal the way you are in Ramadan, but hopefully every Ramadan you're leveling up a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, how do you approach that? Seeing what you saw, I would imagine like, it would cross my. I'm just assuming if I was in your shoes, I'd be like, can I push myself a little bit and try something that like seemed a little crazy to the average American Muslim dude?
Yeah. I mean, if you were to ask them, I would assume that they would tell you the answer, Sayyidina Musa, that these are from the blessings that God has bestowed upon me, wa ana faqir, that I'm just, this is from the blessings of God.
Right.
So that's Allah's the one who gives people capability.
Right.
But has that crossed my mind? Maybe it has crossed my mind at one point. I'm like,
because here's the thing, right? How many people in America are going to be fortunate to meet like a Sidi Ayashi, right? If we're talking about bringing America, like Islam to America, right? And there's this like, isn't there almost like a responsibility? Like you saw this, maybe you can never, maybe you won't hit that level that because obviously this is a person who like abstained from the dunya from the sounds of it, right? So, but couldn't you take some of it and like replicate it to some level? Because I think in a sense that like that becomes like when because Michael Sugich talks about like the signs on the horizon.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like essentially, like I don't know what enters your mind, because we're talking about dawah and like guiding people and all that stuff, and there's a whole thing where like Allah guides and it's all that, but it's a real like fine line, I guess, because what could cross into like showmanship.
Yeah.
You know what you follow what I'm saying? But like it's almost like I think an idea though, but you're like, okay, I saw this. Many people won't see this. I feel like I have a responsibility now to like convey this, because you can talk about it. We all know though that when someone's like, if somebody told you a story of Sidi Ayashi when you were before you left, you'd probably be like, man, that sounds fake, right? Fair enough. But you saw it. Ain't nobody, even people. I bet there are people who are like gonna watch this podcast and still gonna be like skeptical and like, dude, you lived with them for like what? You said you were with them for 6 Ramadans, right? But I think when people see themselves, and in America, the bar is lower because of what our circumstances.
Sure.
You got to, so like, I guess, how do you approach that? Like, as far as maybe having a responsibility, like I know you have your work with the community you have to do, but like I think people are looking for inspiration to push themselves spiritually.
Okay, yes, this is a loaded question, bro. Like you're saying a lot, like you know what I'm saying, like because this puts us into all different like matters of our heart,
yeah, and
intentionality and what's called muhasaba, accountability.
Yeah.
The first one, is, I think there's like the first one is you try to replicate people. They say, if you can't be like them, then pretend to be like them. Tushbiruhum, like replicate them, so you're amongst them. And you're counted amongst them. So yeah, I mean, you try to replicate them as best as you can because they're ambassadors of the Prophet ﷺ at some capacity, and then you try to recognize that like these are inheritors, and if you could hold on to a little bit of their inheritance. The second is like their intention was never to like simply I don't know. I would argue that it wasn't to inspire people because they were in retreat. Like you had to seek them out, but it was not necessarily to inspire people. They were just very. They were writing, their whole life was just attempting to write as many love letters to God as they possibly could. Right? That was Sidi Ashi's life. His life was a love letter to Allah and His Messenger. Like he wrote as much love letters as he could, whether that was in the form of the Quran, the salawat on the Prophet, or just teaching people. Right? And he taught with his presence and more than that. So there was a very strong, and obviously the ripple effect is that, I mean, he's somebody who really hid from the world. Yeah. And Allah still exposed him and says, people need to know who you are. When it comes back to the States, do I think it's a responsibility? I think that, hey, don't think that there are not people like that in America that we don't know about. There's a story when I tell the story all the time. And it brings me jitters just thinking about it. where a man, I was in my first time. It was my first year. I kept walking. Fez is known as the city of saints.
Right. Yeah.
Did I
You
tell
told the
you
story
the
before. Yeah. This story, the story where you're like, this is a wali, this is a wali, this is a
Yeah,
wali, and like,
yeah.
how do you have all these saints in your city and
And we don't have any.
you don't have any, and then you're like stuck for.
No, he said
Ittaqillah.
he said fear God.
Yeah, fear
And I
God,
said,
yeah.
"Allahumma ja'alna muttaqin."
That there's not a gathering of like 40
Well, he
meaning.
said, he said that he recites and what's considered an athar and some considered a hadith of the Messenger of Allah.
Right.
It was like, "La tajma'u arba'in min ummati illa fihim wali." No 40 people gather except from my nation except there's a saint.
Right.
So you have saints, but you've never actually treated them like saints.
Right.
So you do have these like very important,
Mm-hmm.
People that like there was a brother in our community that nobody would ever think about. He came out of incarceration not too long ago, like fairly recently. He's come out of incarceration, and you wouldn't really tell if you were a passing person. But for the last 25 years, he's been fasting the fast of Sayyidina Dawood alayhi salam.
Wow.
Right, 25 years. He hasn't missed a day. Right.
Mondays and Thursdays.
Mondays and
No, every other day.
Every other day.
Oh, okay.
He's been fasting every other day for 25 years. Right?
SubhanAllah.
And you're like, like they're here, they're right in front of you. So
Right.
there are people that are already doing this stuff, right?
Yeah.
One of the, Fakhruddin al-Razi says, one of the things that he always talked about, he calls about the iman of the ajiza, the elderly woman, the older woman.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know the story?
Yeah.
Yeah, he talks about that. The elderly women in our community, who there's not a night that goes past where they haven't done their wird.
Yeah.
Right? That's just really important to them. They probably don't know much about like deen. If I honestly they wouldn't. Like Aqidah is probably like some sort of. They're like, I don't really know. My Aqidah is Surat Ikhlas.
Right.
That's all they'll tell you, right? But
Yeah.
they're so committed to like the spiritual path,
Mm-hmm.
and probably don't even know they're committed to the spiritual path.
Yeah.
That's the funniest part. So you have things like that. Yes, is there an attempt to? But no, you share the stories. You try your best to bring a little bit of a taste of those of people that you've met, and there's a part of it that's also like for me that I'm not going to tell anybody. Like there's certain stories I'll never share, right? Like they'll die with me, and I you know what's funny? Right before, so this you didn't even plan this because we talked about this
a week and a half ago.
A week and a half ago.
Yeah.
The day before we just spoke, and I didn't actually know you were even going to talk about like you said we're doing a Ramadan thing. I didn't know about we're going to get to like Sheikh Ayeshi's anything or any of those people. But I was going through I was looking for like a new like I write a lot. Like I'm not a typer, but I write like khutbahs and talks and classes. I handwrite them and I handwrite them.
You're not worried about getting like carpal tunnel syndrome or something?
No, I'm not worried about that, dude. No, like, but I don't read them off like a computer. I write them down, and I was out of paper, so like I was looking for something, and I found this notebook that a friend gifted to me the day before I left, and it was filled out. It was a diary, and the days I have every day of my Ramadan with. I have them right. I have every single. There's been maybe I've missed the most I've missed in a row was 3 days. I can show it to you after this, but I'll show you it's like I won't read too much of it, but there's some really personal things in there that I've seen.
Yeah.
And
you can read to me while I'll break this like sliding down.
There was some really phenomenal experiences that I've seen these people do. The ability of like seeing, and you've met Sheikh Idris. Yeah. Like how do you feel when you see him? This is the guy. This is the Sheikh.
Right. Well, I always tell the story. I always tell is the one where Sidi Ayub and we're leaving the parking lot, and there's the blind man, and he says, "Maheen, stop! When I stop, I have to give salams and ask this blind his wali for dua, right?" And I remember you probably remember the name, but I don't remember his name. He invited me for tea. I tell the story all the time. It reminded me the whole story about like this is a wali, this is a wali, this is in Fez. Like we're leaving the parking lot, we're about to go out to the outskirts, and he stops. So I actually tell that story more because I met Sheikh Idris after Jummah, and the story there was just like, well, he got us into the bookstore or the library that nobody gets into. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right. But just level of just like presence and humility. That
he spoke English. Huh? He spoke English to me.
Oh, he spoke English to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually didn't know he spoke English until I brought some English people like a year and a half later, and he started spitting English. I'm like, what is that? So we could have done this the whole time. Not too deliberately.
Right.
But it's like very broken. Like it's not.
Yeah.
It's very right. But like there was The reason I'm trying to say that is I think that one of the things that we fall under the trap of is comparing experiences.
Yep.
Our spiritual experiences and the way we approach Ramadan and things like that is not mass produced, it's bespoke, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've become in the mass production community now, where everything has to be wholesale, right? Mm-hmm. As opposed to being like a bespoke experience for every single person. All of us are going to have a different expression of Ramadan, right?
Right.
Fasting is difficult for some people.
Right.
They don't enjoy fasting. It's not their preferred expression of spirituality, but we do it because of the fard.
Okay.
And if you didn't do, and look, and if it's difficult for you, وَمَا تَقَدَّمُ خَيْرٍ إِلَّا لِأَنفُسِكُمْ تَجِدُوا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ هُوَ خَيْرٌ وَأَعْظَمُ وَأَجْرٌ, right? You don't do good except it's for yourself. You're gonna find that reward for Allah. So if you're just, look, if you're somebody who's just simply like, and I say this all of the time, if you're somebody who's just, you work 2 jobs and you're a single mom or whatever, and you're trying to go that, and you're just like getting through the Ramadan, that might be the greatest spiritual experience ever, because you're just doing it because you have to, because you believe in God. God told you to do it, and you're doing it anyways, even though there's nothing inspiring about this for you right now.
Yeah.
There's nothing inspiring. You're not coming into this like gung ho. You're actually pretty anxious, and sometimes actually like really in the rocks. Like, imagine Ramadan if you're coming out of a separation, a divorce. Imagine Ramadan you buried a loved one. Imagine Ramadan you're coming in and you're like you lost your job. Imagine like and we're expecting everybody to have this, the same amount of cheer. Like, it's not Christmas, I know we try to, but it's not. It's not, right? Mm-hmm. Nor should it be. Ramadan's Ramadan, right?
But that's why we were talking offline about like you don't believe in like Ramadan prep. Like it's not like a marathon or
I think a good person to speak about this is actually Dr. Caldwell. He articulates it really, really well.
Yeah.
You could look it up. I think maybe you could put and I don't want to read because he's going to talk about this publicly.
Right, because I think what happens, like a week ago, I'm like, man, if I started preparing for the companions to prepare for Ramadan for 6 months, these are prepare for 6 months in advance. And I was like, if freaking Nick Barrett can prepare for some bodybuilding show, you know what I'm saying? Like, where to stop? Like, why am I not preparing for this?
Right.
And the idea is like you hit the ground running, and even then it's just like, well, and for me, part of the realization is that fasting, we all have preferred ibadah and stuff that we like, and there's stuff that we would say is
we're
not,
just very good at, and
we're other things that we struggle with.
Yeah.
And I have always struggled, and I think in my adult life, I think I've struggled with fasting, and I think I become completely useless in when I'm fasting.
Yeah,
like
I'm
just tired. You shut down. You just want to sleep. It's not even it's like the energy management, right? And I'm that's what you're always worried about. But I want to wrap up with this. A lot of people are trying to, because they get excited, and they're trying to do a lot of things. And I saw a post from Imam Mark Manley today about on Instagram where he was like, listen, if you have a training regime, you talked about training and whatnot, like going to the gym and did you have a routine like that in Morocco as far as going to the gym in Ramadan?
I haven't. Look, I would just go and keep everything fit.
Yeah.
Like whatever, and just try my best to like engage in some level of like physical, but I never was intense.
Okay.
Because that was not my priority.
Yeah, and plus, I'm not sure that the resources were there for that either.
No, you had certain things, for sure. It wasn't bad. It was enough to get it by.
Yeah, okay.
And now it's probably a lot better. Before it was like whack, right? Before it was like a rocky. It was like a rocky gym before.
Oh.
Like, cables.
Yeah.
They would have the chains. That's how old the machines are. It wasn't the cables. It was chains.
Wow.
They coming up.
Right.
Right. Like it was chains. But I never like prioritized it.
I got you. But did you train outside of Ramadan in Morocco?
Of course.
Okay. So a lot of times people were like they're like not training at all, and then like, oh, Ramadan, I'm gonna lose weight, I'm gonna do this, and my Mark was like, listen, if you already have a routine, if it's part of your life, you can maintain it, but this is probably not the right time to introduce something brand new like trying to get in shape.
In the very first of all,
in Ramadan.
Yeah, well, first of all, in a time where you're in such a deficit.
Yeah.
And your body is depleted.
Yeah.
It's not a good time to do anything intense.
Right.
Physically. This is how people get hurt.
Right.
And you're not going to maintain it. There is a thing called Fogg's graph. You heard of Fogg's graph?
No.
He has a book called Tiny Habits. He talks about Fogg's. He talks about maintaining smaller habits.
Sure. Until
you reach higher goals. That's a hadith. He wrote a whole book on it. It's a hadith. The Prophet said, Al-Qayrawayin University, like the best action is the thing that is done small, consistently, even if it's small. Working on Ramadan is the most inconsistent thing in the world. Like you're not gonna maintain it. Like if you're not doing it, you had 11 months. This is when you could decide.
You start
11 months.
Yeah.
You start now in the 1 month where you're supposed to disengage with your body and focus on your mind and heart.
Right.
The one time. Right?
Yeah.
It's asinine, right? I appreciate it. I understand it.
Is it common in your line of work that brothers will like talk about this? Like they want to start in Ramadan.
Yeah, and you're like, talk to first of all, I know what you're gonna get from me.
Yeah.
Talk to somebody who's like good at this stuff. But second of all, no, I would be like, yeah, maybe like do a jump rope for 10 minutes. I don't know, like do a couple pull-ups. But like if your goal is like now losing weight, Ramadan is not a diet.
Yeah. Right.
Interesting enough,
some people gain weight.
Some people gain weight. I mean, Ramadan means to burn.
Yeah.
So like they used to say, I had a teacher. He used to say, Ramadan like you're burning calories, right? It's supposed to be sins, right?
Yeah.
Right? You're purifying your heart. But like it's supposed to be a time where you sort of, and this is like the really important part. Preparation from Ramadan prep. We're in we're recording this right now in a Sha'ban.
Yeah.
Right. The Messenger of Allah there was no month outside of Ramadan which he fasted like Sha'ban. Why? Because in Nisf Sha'ban and another hadith in other parts of Sha'ban, the Prophet ﷺ said that the actions of the children of Adam are presented to Allah, right? And I prefer that my actions are presented and I'm fasting, right? I'm in a fasted state. There's something really significant about Ramadan that I would tell. The first one is that it's a time where you're not going to find validity, right?
What do you mean?
You're going to prep spiritually. Spiritual prep will always be in any time. People that are spiritually engaged will always look down upon, right? The idea of disengaging for something will always be seen as something that is alien, that is strange, that's weird, because it's not a physical transformation. It's a heart transformation. And you're trying to combine between, Allah says in the Quran, مَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لِرَجُلٍ مِّن قَلْبَيْن فِي جَوْفِهِ. Like Allah doesn't put two hearts in a single man, right? We're deciding which heart that we're going to prepare to present to God once Ramadan comes in. And that is through fasting, because it gives you the ability to discern things, right? And why does it give you the ability to discern things? Is because you have the virtual heart. This is my term. You have this like really like virtual heart that has been sort of informed to us by, like the culture, certain cultures, outside forces, whatever that thing is, and we're convinced that we are this machine that we're not, right? And this is the dunya. This is the world. It's to convince something what you are, convince you of what you're not, right? This is the nafs al-amara bisu, the animalistic soul, the carnal soul, right? And then you have this thing called the actual heart, which is the one that is the ruh. This is the qalb, like this is the thing that is oscillating constantly. This is the thing that is mitigating its relationship with God. When you're in a state of fasting, like you are going to you're transforming yourself to the point where you're not, or any type of worship, any type of spiritual exposure, you're going to seem like a majnoon, like a crazy person. We talked about Shaykh Ayashi. Shaykh Ayashi, if we told our children that this is our role model, they say you're insane. Warren Buffett's your guy, not somebody like this. This would be acid. Like we talk about it, man, and it's cool, but let's be honest. That's not who we strive to be. Collectively, that's not what the heart. We really strive to be. We're Jeff Bezos.
No, we'd rather. I was watching. You seen that show on Netflix called Dubai Bling?
I haven't. I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
So there's a dude on there. He's 34 years old. How old? You're not. You get 30 yet? These are 30, right? So he's 4 years older than you. We're $50 million, self-made. Like flour coffee business, right? So you see that, and you're like, and you like that's what you're interested, because the dunya is the draw.
Exactly.
Right. The thing of it is, but it's weird though, because when you meet people like these, like awliya, you gravitate towards it, but it's not like it's not one of those things that like I'm like daydreaming about. You're daydreaming about like drip or sneakers or cars. Yeah, so you're right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So to be honest, is like, how do you get to be like, no, you have to accept the fact that this is some people that we believe these are qudwas, these are models that
Yeah.
we're trying to follow. But like the fact of the matter is, let's come to really like honest terms about it. That's not something that's hot enough. That doesn't sell. That's not. Yeah, it's nice, mashallah. Dalal khairat. Alhamdulillah, nice, it's cute, it's cool to talk about.
Ideally,
How do you
someone
engage
would.
in it?
Yeah, but
And what? By the way, what is more accessible than the other? What's right there? What's right there? You talk about this bling light. What that's you, but there's something else that they have, but it's right in front of you. You just have to open it. You just have to experience it.
Yeah.
It's on you. That's between which one of these two hearts, this virtual heart that is actually really difficult to maintain and actually even difficult to achieve, or the one that's actually right there. And a lot of times, and then one of the things about Ramadan is God is telling us, I'm yours for the taking. Like I'm right here, right? In the Hadith Qudsi, he says, "Innani lam ansa man asani, fa kayfa man atani." Like I didn't forget about the one that disbelieved in me. How do I forget the one that believed in me?
I need you to flesh that out a little bit because, like, okay, I'm not sure if I fully grasp what you're saying because, yes, you're right. Deep down, if you were to ask us, because most people would be like, they're gonna watch this podcast. They were like, okay, if they're a dude who's like 20, like aspirational, right? They'll see you like, okay, I want to look like this guy. He's in shape, and he dresses well, mashallah, and he does all this like ilm stuff too. They want this package, so to speak. Like people, I think want like because you talk to people and they were like they want spirituality, but they want the dunya stuff too. And the thing that's uncomfortable about it is that when you talk about Sidi Ayashi, like eating dates and couscous, I'm like, nah, son, I ain't doing that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure. No, I get it.
You know what I mean? Or
get it.
you read some of the story, like, yeah, the stories when you read Michael Sugich's books, you're like, this is amazing. And some things you can get down with. You can get down with like, maybe I can push myself to do like all this adhkar or like recitation.
But Maheen, this is Amazon Prime Islam.
What do you mean?
I mean, this is Amazon Prime. This is like, I saw them, I want that, let this happen in 2 days. This takes them years to master. This is an art that takes them years to master. It took Imam Malik's teacher 40 years to master Nafs. 40 years. Yeah. It took him to master.
Yeah. So you're seeing a man when he's like 120 years old.
I'm seeing somebody who's dedicated his life to mastering a very specific science of worship, of being in, right? It's not going to take us 2 days, 3 days. This is not Amazon Prime.
So even like getting fit is quick, compared to, relatively speaking.
Relatively, but even that, people are like 30 days and whatever, right? It's like, no, bro, you spent 30 years, like having 4 servings of McDonald's. It's not gonna happen in a month, right? Like you have to, like you said, you have to empty things out. Imam Ghazali says a thing that is filled cannot be filled until it's poured into, right? Like that's what it's saying. God hasn't put 2 hearts in one person. You have to decide which heart you're gonna actually engage in, right? And what does fasting do? That look, there's 2. Fasting does this, is that we're always going to have this fight between ourselves. And this is why fasting, if it's difficult for you, I think you make a really good point. There's a tradition where God tortures the nafs, the lower self, tortures it. And he says, who am I and who are you? And the ego says, well, in a very challenging way, right? In a really like this is in a very confrontational way. It says, I am me and you are you. Like, let's step up, God. That's what the nafs is saying. Then God tortures it, physically puts it in the fire, brings it out, says, who are you? And he goes, I'm you and you are. Then God, same response. And then Allah prohibits for it food and drink, satiation. And he leaves it go for a little bit. By the end of this month, for like 30 days. Yeah. And then God says, who are you and who am I? And he says, I am a desperate soul in need, right? وَأَنْتَ اللَّهُ الْغَنِيُّ الْحَمِيدُ, and you are Allah the enriching and the most praiseworthy. By the end of Ramadan, if you feel beaten down, you've done your job, because Ramadan teaches us that God is the only thing that is everlasting and enriching. We are the ones who are desperate. Like, you better feel beaten down by the end of Ramadan, right? That feeling of being beaten down tells us, in the end of the day, we are human beings and we're engaging in something angelic. Like, who do angels fast? Do angels eat? No. Do angels procreate? No. Do angels drink? No. When we're in the state of fasting, you're in a state of angelic presence, but you can only stay there for so long. But one of the greater things for that is like we've actually choose to engage in that, and then you do what's called a hisab, and accountable. Like, this I need to work on. If all you got from after this month is like I've gained 1 virtue and I've let go of 1 vice, that's a good month.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious on how you mentor people, for example, like as dudes, right? Or even, I'm sure girls like the same way. especially if you're single. Let's say you're in love with someone of the opposite gender. Very common scenario, hypothetically speaking. Let's say you are, and you know that right now, and you may be in an illicit relationship,
right?
And we know all this stuff. There's, I don't know, like the authenticity, but someone who's in an active zina, the iman is lifted during the act, and that kind of thing. And this person is still like during the day, obviously not doing it, but in the evening they might be, or they may abstain they may be abstaining, but it's like that's a emotion that I'm sure people is really tough to struggle with, because they want to get better, but they actually like if they have like real ishq for somebody, you know what I'm saying? They struggle with that. And then that's like, because I would assume that to be a very difficult, back and forth, or are they just hanging on? Like, or is the mindset, hey, let me just hang on to it on the month, and maybe you're hoping that something will change. Like, what kind of advice? Because those are like real scenarios that people are struggling with. That's pretty normal. It's a normal human reaction to or need. Like, because food and stuff is one thing, right? We can eat at the end of the night.
Okay, I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm saying? But you're not married. Like someone who's not married and they're like in love with somebody. They're in some kind of like modern day like Layla and Majnun, right? So to speak.
Sure.
That person, they're not married to them. They can't go to them. I mean, they could. It won't break their fast. But it's like, all right, should you be doing this? And because you hear about,
oh, you hear stories.
Yeah, for sure.
Sometimes too many. Like, they're not fun to hear.
But like that person, that's like not an easy situation to bust out of. Right?
Yeah, it depends on who you're talking to, but ishq al-da' al-qatil wa dawa al-ittisal. This intoxicating love is a deadly disease.
Right.
Its remedy is matrimony. I mean, the simpler one is, dude, just get married, dude. Like, do your nikah. Like, why is this such a problem? Like,
well, that's one thing, but
there's all the challenges between.
But is there a solution where you try to focus more on love of Allah and love of the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam through abundant afkar and try to drown it out? Is that a valid?
No, I think drowning out is not.
Is not.
Look, who's there at that point? Like, who are you gonna tell? Like, it depends who you're talking to. Yeah, if you're talking to somebody that's been exposed to like a very spiritual, then you could tell them that, and they're like, yeah, of course, I get it. If you're talking about like, these younger Muslim cats, guys and girls who are like in their whatever.
Well, you talk about the other thing. You're talking about people entering Ramadan after divorce, right? And they're very vulnerable at that point in time. Let's say and maybe that's a different state.
Maybe it's you
know what I'm saying, and then you're involved in, or you're jaded, or you did something by the book, and now you're jaded in that sense, and then you're like, okay, doing a halal didn't work for me the first time around.
Well, that's crazy. I think that's a false notion. Doing it halal doesn't work for me. Like, what does that mean?
Well, people say that.
They say that, but you're gonna blame you don't blame legislation, and this is one of the things of accountability and love is like these are the red like strawman arguments how we put in our heads and we put it out on a month. It's like that has nothing to do with legislation.
Right.
What does that possibly have to do with the revelation? Right.
Right.
That's your relationship. And relationships work, and some relationships don't work. And then, perhaps you disdain something and it is good for you.
Right.
Ramadan is to actually bring. It's Ramadan's a spiritual experience. It's not there to fulfill. Fasting does not satiate. All of Ramadan is to tell us you are in no need of what you think you need. Right?
Yeah.
So if you could get rid of things that are halal, you don't think you can get rid of habits that are impermissible? If you could stay away from things that are needs, you don't think Ramadan's an empowering month in the sense of, and you look, why do people really do, Maheen, let's be honest. We have a deep problem of self-worth in our communities that allow us to cheapen ourselves and engage in behaviors and succumb to a certain appetite that's agitating us. Can we agree on that?
Sure.
There is a problem with self-worth. There's a problem with a reactionary type of identitarian Islam that's like, loss. We're a victimized community in one sense, I think a little bit, but we're also like it's been presented to us in a way where like there is no much healing. There's no healing when it comes to fasting. And when for somebody to be healed, we have to go through a very difficult detox at times. And a lot of it is people engaging in these activities because they feel worthless. Mm-hmm. The Prophet ﷺ says something that I've always thought was like, what does this mean for Ramadan? Like, what does this hadith mean? He says that خلوف من فم الصائم أطيب عند الله من ريح المسك. That the breath of the one that is fasting is more pure to God, or more beloved to God, or more, it's more it's a perfume to God, more of a perfume to God than musk, which isn't like physically it's not. You're not having water, you smell terrible, and these are to a bunch of Bedouins who are in the desert. Imagine their breath, right? What is it really saying is like what you find towards being like everybody that's invalidated you in this world, right? There's no need to care about them because you're already being validated in the eyes of God. That's sort of narrative you have to really push to get through these months. You know what I mean? And sexual appetite is real. People engage in stuff. The door of redemption can never be closed when every single what does the do every night Allahu ibadihi min an-nar. Allah like frees his servants from the fire. Frees them. If you're doing it in a state of fasting, it's haram. We know the fidya, the kafara for that. We know there's kafara for that. That's just a reality. But hold on. There is a kafara for that. But where do we get? You know what's interesting? Where do we get the rulings for kafara? You know the hadith where we get the rulings for kafara? A man comes to the Messenger of Allah and he says, halaktu, I'm damned.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
That's where we get the rulings for it. Right?
Yeah.
He said, what happened? He said that I was intimate with my spouse. Right? Like jama'tu mi'amrati wa ana sa'im. I had sex with my wife. Yeah. And I was in a state of fasting. Right? And the Prophet says like, that's fine. Why don't you just tosumu shahrain mutatabi'ain, 2 consecutive months fast. He said, oh, Messenger of Allah, I didn't last a night. Right. A day. How do you think I'm going to last, And then the Messenger, said, just free a slave. He said, who am I going to find a slave to free? And he says, and feed like indigent people, And he says, I'm the most indigent among the people that I know. And it said the Messenger of Allah laughed, hatta kashafa until his molar teeth were exposed. And he went back and he essentially gives some dates, and he says go use these dates and go feed your family. And as the guy's walking, he said, I realized, O Messenger of Allah, that I'm actually the most poor of the people. He said go feed your family and Allah will forgive you. Like people dealt with this, companions dealt with this. Remember the companions, the verse before fasting, before the ones that we mentioned, and I think it's like 83 or 183 or 184, is the companions do a buyout from Ramadan. They're trying to buy themselves out of Ramadan. Do you know what I'm saying? This is actually very difficult for some of them as well. Not the more righteous, the ones sort of with the elite amongst the companions. May Allah have mercy on all of them. But there's elite companions, and they're ones that are actually struggling with this. There's obviously going to be people in our community that's right. And then on top of that, I think that's that conversation.
And your point to focus on is the nature of that sexual appetite.
The nature of appetite.
Not that, because someone would be like, well, they were halal for each other outside of Ramadan because they're married.
I'm talking about the nature of sexual appetite.
Nature, right?
No, we're talking about that of it.
Yep.
Now you look at ours, we don't justify that behavior. But bro, like, there's something special about Ramadan where like even people that never practice fast in Ramadan.
Yeah.
There's something really strange. Look, this is the hardest thing we're asked for.
It is.
This is the hardest by far amongst the pillars. It's like the hardest thing to do by far. This is harder than zakat. 2.5 pay 30%.
It's like
what are you talking about?
Something. Yeah, it's like
prayer is like not that difficult.
Right.
Shahada, okay. You know what I'm saying? Hajj, you do it if you can. It's once a year. You're done. Every year.
Once in a lifetime. Yeah.
Once in a lifetime. Sorry, once in a lifetime. You do this like once a year, right? Everybody's engaged in it. Everybody's engaged. I know people that fast, bro, and don't pray. Like they'll fast and they won't pray. You know what I'm talking about? There's something really like inspiring. Like what's going on in this month, right? I think that like this idea of redemption, and look, we live in a time where we're holding on to a hot coal. What did you think it's gonna look like, right? Like it wasn't gonna be like the Mamluk dynasty or the Umayyads, right? And the creation of the Nizamiya. Like it's gonna look like this. Like this was how difficult it was. I think the piece on Ramadan has to be a time where like you disengaged from your sexual appetite, if that's a problem from you.
Yep.
And you attempt to re-engage in your or sort of recalibrate your heart towards being satiated from love of God. And this is where, whether we like it or not, and I'll say this publicly, bro, this is where tasawwuf means everything. You can't do this without some engagement with level of tasawwuf. And I'm not talking about the orders. I'm not talking about any of these things. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about some real engagement with tasawwuf, right? The fiqh can take us this far, but in terms of our personal spiritual development, you have to have your pulse on the tasawwuf. And that's the only way that you're going to be able to understand how Sidi Ayashi becomes Sidi Ayashi, right? That's the only way. Dude, you know how old Sidi Ayashi is? He remembers hearing on the radio the fall of the caliphate.
Yeah.
Right? Imagine the people that he's met along the way. Imagine the people that have raised the ranks of Shaykh Ayashi.
That sounds like a teaser for a future podcast.
Sure. We should talk about that for sure.
I think that's another, because it's the way you set it up. It seems like it's not something that's a quick 5 minutes.
No, it's a long conversation. Who did he meet? I can tell you people that he met. I won't say it now.
No, but it's idea of like tasawwuf, like being like, okay, your fiqh won't get you so far, but like just focus on that. Like, what does that mean? I think that's what I mean. It's like that's a separate conversation.
Yeah, without the fiqh, you cannot engage in tasawwuf. But the tasawwuf, the reality is entering Ramadan with abstinence, zuhud, abstinence. It's a month of abstinence, and it's not abstinence for the sake of abstinence. It's an abstinence for the sake of conquering certain vices and actually becoming angelic, right? And I know that sounds crazy for some people, or just like really whatever, but you're doing it. What are you talking about? You're all of us are engaging in it,
right?
Whether we like it or not, we're engaging in it. And there has to be a level of empowerment. If people are struggling with sexual appetite, there's 30 nights where you plead to God to help you with that, and re-engage you to a higher, and re-engage your heart to a higher power, and navigate through that. That's always going to be a problem, man. We live in a hyper-sexualized world. Like the fact that like people are even thinking about that. They have nedem, which is a condition of Toba. You know, that's a win for us. That's a win for us. So before we ever like, you know, shoot that in the foot, we're shooting ourselves in the foot collectively. So that's why, you know, how do you create these, you know, we talk about all these great saints, we don't talk about the men and women that are around them that actually were able to nurture them. You know, who said that they didn't have issues with their, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, who said that they didn't have, there was, you know, when I came back, and I got a gym membership when it was the summer. And you know how the gym is, right? In the summertime. You know what I mean?
I go to USA.
You go to USA, but I went like a commercial gym.
Yeah.
And this was just like selfie central.
Yeah, there's not a lot of like chicks at USA.
Yeah, it's a great spot to go to. But
you only need one.
It's funny.
You know what I'm saying?
I can't say stuff like that. I shouldn't. But
no, you get what I'm saying though. Like
I know
it only take like the environment's there, but I think the environment USA is just like people are serious.
Yeah, people are
going there, and
but like, if you go to, what I'm saying is like, and you know, obviously, mind you, like I've been around these, say it's like people 26 at this time, 25, 26, come back, go to the, and I remember talking to my sheikh, and I asked him like Sheikh, I feel really guilty. He's what? He's like, I literally told him, it's like, I'm back in America, and subhanAllah, like a summertime and whatever, like I'm just like it's, I realize how like I thought I was with all of you for so long, and I thought I'll come back and none of these things would be a problem anymore. Like, what's going on? Mm-hmm. He said, my son, you know, Adi is the first thing he said. He's like, this is normal. He said, what? He said, what did you think this path prepares you for? Mm-hmm. It's preparing you for that. Mm-hmm. The fact that you can recognize this, mm-hmm. that's a sign that you've been prepared for it. Mm-hmm. And now you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I think like when it comes to Ramadan, it's a tough month, and hopefully you're too tired to engage in such activities. I mean, that's one of glad tidings. But there are people that you know, redemption is really important. Yeah. And at the end of the day, the only thing that can change people's hearts is they recalibrate things to the divine. Ramadan, I think, to wrap that part up, is like you mentioned ishq, You know what ishq is in Arabic?
It's like some kind of like really passionate love.
Ishq is actually it's a vine from a tree that wraps it up
Okay.
and suffocates it.
Mm.
That's ishq. So they say ad-da' al-qatil. It's a deadly disease. We're trying to get to the level of, and you mentioned a man and a woman, and our Islamic Muslim poetry has always talked about this love between a man and a woman. Layla and Manjouj, Shirin Khusro, all of these great people. Hafid talks about it. Firdausi talks about it. Farabi talks about him. There's a level of God says, "Women ayatina khalaqakum min anfusikum azwaja." We made you in these two pairs.
Yep.
Pairs, so you find serenity in one another. We made everything in pairs. Subhanallah, khalaqa azwaja kullaha. We made everything in pairs. So this is like a really important metaphor that is used as well as knowing God. Is that you begin with this ishq. All the lower thing knows, the lower heart knows, is this deadly disease, sleepless nights, sliding in DMs. The only way of expressing love is through hypersexuality, right? And that opens a door, maybe for a different time we could talk about, is why we're experiencing some of the more confusion behind gender and appetite taking over how we express the sexuality, which is very problematic. It tells us that's the only one. Then you have muhabba, which is like a seed that's planted, and that's the first day of Ramadan.
Right.
That's the first day of Ramadan. The seed is planted. That's a hab. Hab is a seed. Muhabba is a nurturing type of love. Once you nurture it, by the end of Ramadan, those last 10 days, you get what's called, you get muwadda. You get the name wudud, celestial love. That's where it's starting to grow into. But you have to recognize, you have to go away from this lowly ishq thing. But you have to get to muwadda. That's really the goal. Whether it's, I'm going to do it through fasting only, or I'm going to do it through fasting and reading Quran, the night prayer, I'm going to go into it. That's where your heart really is trying to be engaged to, right? Like that's Ramadan. That's Ramadan. How do I get from these 3 stages of love? By the end is actually saying that my expressions to the love of God are not through my desire, but everything I'm doing is like, God, look, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I'm really beaten down. I actually don't even understand spiritually, but I know I love you, right? And I know you love me. I don't know what I'm about, and I know like I'm super confused. But if this is what it takes for me to express your love, at least please just accept the fact that I'm trying my best to love you as best as I can. And inshallah, you have to trust faith as a process. So
right. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up. Where can people, if they want to reach out, what's the best way for them to reach out to you these days?
For me, you could come to Tatlif whenever.
If you're in Chicago.
If I'm in Chicago, or email me. I think Haseeb@tatlifcollective.org. And now I'm a little more active on Instagram, although I don't respond all the time, but I'm a little more active on Instagram now. And inshallah, I'll try my best to engage in that because that's the only place to engage with people now. But like, yeah, and they can always tell Maheen what's up, and you know how to find me, inshallah.
I like most inquisitions are like, is Umair available for marriage, and I usually shoot them down immediately.
Oh, okay.
Just because
I think we should wrap up. That's
a wrap. Because I'm just like, there are usually a bunch of people that are like, I'm just like, nah, I'm picky for my boy. You know what I mean?
Allah bless you.
I mean, okay. So anyways, on that note, if you have any questions or comments, you can email me at info@sultansandsneakers.com. If you like the channel and you want to support it, hit like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. Leave a comment on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want to support financially, you can do so at patreon.com/sultansandsneakers. For my special guest, Shaykh Umair Haseeb, I'm your host, Maheen the podcaster, signing off. Assalamu alaikum.